I'm Paul. This is Thomas. We're here to talk about electric longboards and electric skateboards today, give you our perspective on what the advantages and disadvantages are of each, so you can help make up your mind if you like one thing versus another. Oh, I forgot the OneWheel. Thomas, can you grab that out of there? Cool. Sorry, there. I'll grab the other one too.
What?
Pull it out.
What? What? How long has it been in there?
We picked up with the border. And we got a new OneWheel.
That's awesome.
This is the OneWheel Plus. Okay, so we're back in Canada, tons of snow outside, but we had 3 weeks to try all these out. Of course, we've been riding the boosted boards and the OneWheels for almost 3 years now, but got lots of time in on the Landwheel, and we can kind of compare these all for someone who's thinking about their first or their second board. For us, we've got all of them. I wouldn't give up any of them, but not everyone's going to spend $6,000 on electric boards for fun. So the OneWheels are kind of your only choice if you want to do riding in the rain and the snow and the ice. You've got to be a heavier rider to manage it on the ice because there are no treads, but you do get lots of suspension out of it. You can turn on a dime. It is the most waterproof board, weatherproof board that's out there, so those are a lot of advantages. There are some downsides. The newer board, the sensor doesn't work out quite as well, so it is a little harder to use than the original OneWheel. It's just kind of harder to launch and harder to start. Difficult to describe. I have a friend down in the States who bought a OneWheel Plus and doesn't ride it because he just hasn't figured it out. So that's a risk for a first-time skateboarder. Another risk is that when you make a mistake, you will have to jump off and run. You may fall, and it's not going to happen every day, but it'll probably happen once or twice a year. So you have to be prepared for that. You have to be nimble. And when you fall on these, it's usually because you either hit a pothole or you hit a bigger bump than you expected. You might lose contact with the sensor pad, or you might just try to accelerate too fast, be a little bit too overconfident, and the nose will drop. And then once you don't have balancing, these things become really unstable, so you gotta jump off and run. And they're also kind of a 25-pound missile, so you gotta get out of the way, or you've got something really heavy and really sharp aimed at your ankle. And that happened to me, and that hurts a lot, and something similar happened to my son as well. Still love them, still ride them all the time. Range is another disadvantage. You get about a 6-mile range out of these, and if you miscalculate and you end up a distance from home, you've got a 25-pound sack of potatoes that's really difficult to carry. It's too sharp to carry it like this. There's really nothing to grab on. If you try and carry it frontwards like this, you end up being lopsided frontwards. So the only way to carry it is lopsided sideways with 25 pounds on this side. And as you can see, you can't really grab your whole fist around it. So you end up with really these 3 fingers doing all the work to carry 25 pounds. And if you're a 6'2", 220-pound guy, you can make it for a few miles like that. If you're a little kid, you're not going to make it much more than a block. So those are all considerations as whether you want this as your first board or not. Another one is top speed. This one was 12 miles an hour. You can get an update and download it that does the 14 miles an hour, which seems fine and comfortable, but you're not going to keep up with friends on a boosted board or other boards that are doing 22 miles an hour plus. This new one apparently does 19 miles an hour. I left it on the original setting, which seems to do about the same speed as the original OneWheel, and I was comfortable with that. I didn't really want to try the higher speeds because when something goes wrong on a OneWheel, it's not like being on a 4-wheel skateboard where you just kind of come to a quiet, coast to a stop. And if there are hills involved, it makes it more complicated. So I'm not sure if I'll ever try out the 19 mile an hour setting on the newer OneWheel. So those are all the pluses and minuses. Still love them, would never give them up, but let's talk about the next board. Okay, boosted boards. We've had them for about almost 3 years. They're wonderful. It's kind of our first board, and really kind of taught me to really enjoy the bamboo loaded decks. It's a really important feature to have a springy bamboo board, because at speeds or highway that's got or asphalt that's got some bumps and imperfections in it, it really absorbs a lot of that and makes it a much more comfortable ride for the rider, knees, ankles, everything. They're really reliable. The top speed's about right, 22 miles an hour. Don't often really want to go over that unless you're on a closed court or a closed circuit, because you never know when someone's going to walk out or a car is going to pull out. Disadvantages with the boosted board: one is price, which is a bit pricey. The other is ground clearance. So you'll notice how scraped up these get. If you go from a sidewalk to the road, or if you go over a big crack, you do bottom out, and it does impact this area here. My first boosted board, the Generation 1, I bent a motor shaft. They replaced it for free for me. I did have to pay for the shipping, but it is kind of a risk. Just moderately more ground clearance with the Generation 2 boosted board. But the most wonderful boards, I really have nothing bad to say about them, except that there is a little bit of potential collision risk when you make a mistake. These accelerate very briskly, assuming you choose speed 3 or speed 4, and they're very responsive to what you do with your thumb. So what has happened to my son and I, once or twice each, is we've hit an irregular road surface, we've kind of lost our balance. And when your arm does this, you end up, either going full throttle or full reverse, not because you want to, but just because it's kind of a reflex. And when you do that, these are powerful enough that they will spin out and throw you off, or if it's deceleration the other ways, they can also throw you off there. The deceleration thing hasn't happened to me, the acceleration has, and my son's experienced falling off both due to deceleration and acceleration. So those are risks. The risks are lower if you stick to the slower speeds, but not everyone sticks to the slower speeds. So those are considerations. Okay, next up. Okay, so this is the Landwheel, and it's been around for a while. The earlier versions with it had a lot of problems, including cutting out and brakes that were too strong, and really long list of problems. They worked on it for 2 years. They've replaced all of them for all their customers that bought the original version, even 2 years later, which is kind of impressive. They've got bigger wheels, which was a complaint because they didn't have enough PU. These are replaceable wheels, and they send you 2 extra, which is cool. This can be purchased either as just the drive unit and wheels, or it can come with the deck. Personally, I recommend it without the deck. I think they picked the deck to fit the box, so it's really too short for a board that goes this fast, which is 28 miles an hour. I think you need a wider stance for a board like this. And it's a maple bamboo board, which is stiffer, and you feel a lot more of the road vibrations through this than you do in a full bamboo board. One convenience of the board is that they have engineered it well so that this doesn't slap against the bottom. So that is an advantage, but I don't think it outweighs the advantages of picking a flexible bamboo board that really suits your own needs. There are some new safety features in this which are just amazing. Firstly, the remote vibrates when you change battery levels, as your battery depletes, so you don't actually, if you're going along, need to go, how much do I got left? That's a cool feature. This is the only board that I know of, and I tested this, that you can take to the top of a hill on a full battery and head downhill and use your brakes, and the board won't beep or cut out, and it'll actually give you braking downhill. So that's really cool. I made that mistake once on the OneWheel, and I heard beep, 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 and I was like, why is it beeping? I got a full, and then the board nosedived, and I had to jump off and run. And it's never happened to me on the boosted board, but it's in the manual that it can happen. So the idea of just turning off to avoid overcharging has always bothered me, and somehow they've figured out how to not do that on this board. I got some idea of how they've done it. They used to have 2 redundant positive terminals, and they've basically split those, so they've got one for powering the ESC and another for regenerative braking. And I've been told that the ESC can somehow cut off the regenerative braking, and it does it early enough to prevent overcharging going downhill. Also, these batteries take a lot longer to charge, so they've got a lot more charging resistance. So I think that's another factor that helps them to do a bit downhill braking on a full battery. In case I haven't mentioned the obvious, these are removable batteries. which is really cool if you get multiple batteries, which I highly recommend. This board was made for multiple batteries, so to buy it with one doesn't make a lot of sense. You want to make sure you get a new L3-x. If you're looking online and you see an L3 Landwheel, those are the dangerous ones, or anything that isn't an L3-x. You want to make sure you get a battery that's got this blue sticker on it, because that's one of the new ones. They've got a higher capacity than the old version 3s. And you definitely don't want anything with orange wheels. Now these batteries, range varies. I've seen a guy in Sydney on a continuous circuit with no stops log 7 miles on one of these. I have friends who have these who say they only get 4.2. Me, 4.2 matches with one battery, and I'll talk to you about ways you can get more range out of that if you put 2 batteries together. So I have a bit more to say about the braking on these. Both the acceleration and the braking are moderated. So when I was talking about the BoostedBoard and I said you could throw yourself off if you lose your balance and jerk the remote, that doesn't happen on this. In fact, you can accelerate faster on a Landwheel by moving the remote up slowly than if you do this, because if you do that, it assumes that you're not in control and it gives you a safe acceleration curve. Similar on the braking, if you jam the brakes down, you don't get full-on brakes. You get a braking curve that brings you to a gentle stop. It's about a car length, half a car length longer than I could do on the BoostedBoard for my weight, which is a good trade-off for having a board that I'm pretty confident will never throw me off the front or the back of the board. Because that's the only times I've been hurt, is when I've lost balance, jerked the remote, and gotten more acceleration than I wanted. And for my son, sometimes he's gotten more deceleration than he's wanted, and he's gone off the front of a BoostedBoard. So really good safety choices there. If the battery dies, even with a completely depleted battery in terms of its critical voltage, this automatically brings you to a gentle stop, which is pretty cool, even if you're on a hill, and I tested that. And if you drop your remote, or if your remote battery dies, or if for some reason you decide to turn the remote off while you're on the board and you're at any kind of speed, it initiates a safe braking curve and brings you to a stop. So it's really cool that this has gone from, in the space of 2 years, clearly one of the most dangerous boards that was out there, to what I personally think is the safest of the ones that I have. Now I want to show you another Landwheel setup that I've got. I'm just going to pop this down. Now this is where I think the Landwheel really comes into its own, is being able to choose your own deck. Now I chose a Flex 1, which is 4 inches longer than the BoostedBoard. It's a Vanguard Flex 1. It just absorbs so much road vibrations, so much in the way of cracks. I didn't mention before, these wheels are massive, and that really evens out a lot of road perfections, and some really big cracks that you could get locked into with a smaller wheel. You just kind of go right over them, and you feel the bump, but there's not the risk of having the wheels grabbed. You know, the ability to pick a board that gives you the stance that you want, or if you want a kick on the end, you can do that, is just a huge advantage. This board is wonderful for me. It's easier on my knees, easier on my ankles. The carving's great on it. Now I have some personal recommendations to make if you're going to go with an arched or a cambered board like this. What I found is that if I tried to tighten the Landwheel directly to this, I had a curved board and a flat machine, and it was trying to break the neck of the Landwheel. And so I could see it wasn't going to work. So what I did is I took these giant vibration pads from Princess Auto. You could probably get them from a lot of different types of stores. Kind of trimmed it down, and I stuck it below there in order to give me this space so that as the board flexes, I'm not having a battle between the board and the deck. And I have seen pictures online of people where the Landwheel has popped apart. That was before they put longer screws in, but I personally believe the reason it popped apart is because they tried to bolt it directly to a curved deck. You want to make sure, if you've got a flexi deck, that you've got some space here so that you don't either have flapping against the deck or a potential device breaking situation from the stress of the board fighting the drive. In my case, I actually sandwiched it between so I could get as much vibration reduction as possible, and I put a little aluminum plate on top so that the screws don't pull through the rubber. On this board, I also put a headlight on front, which I kind of like. And I did something a little unusual, which the manufacturer doesn't recommend, but I'm going to tell you about anyways, which is I put two Landwheels together. There's no speed controller in here. It's just a dummy box for holding an extra battery. And I ran basically two jumper cables through a fiber cable tube, and I just hot glued that down. There's some real advantages of this. One is better range. So when you take one battery that can do 4.2 miles, some people say 7, and you put it together with an extra battery, I got basically 10 miles of range out of this. And I didn't have to carry the spare battery, and you get a bit of extra balance as well. Now, the disadvantage is the manufacturer says don't do this. They say the batteries aren't designed for this, so that's important to know. Also, if you stick one battery in here, lick your fingers and grab the two other terminals, you're grabbing 42.5 volts. I haven't tried it, but I imagine it could hurt or maybe even burn a hole in your finger. So there are a number of things about this that are unsafe, but if you're a very large rider and you're not an idiot who's going to intentionally endanger your own skin, it's something to think about, and you can do that with one of the dangerous old Landwheels, which you might be able to find on the internet somewhere. I guess what's up for me next is I'm really interested in doing a quad Landwheel, which is a 4-wheel drive Landwheel with one on the front, one on the back. I'm not going to need any cables between the two of them. Now, they don't yet have any kind of coordination between these, so you would either have to control the two Landwheels separately, which I've done in the past with earlier versions, or you can do something like this. So if you zoom in here, all I've done is I've taken, let me just pop this off here. So I've taken two remotes, I've used some foam tape to glue them down to a little piece of ABS, and I've taken an extra little strip here, which I've drilled a hole, and then I've used a scroll saw to do a slot. I did the same thing here, drilled a hole, did a scroll saw for a slot, and I can just take that and put it on both stems and push it down, and now I've got two remotes that are in sync. So I haven't tried that yet with the L3-x. I've actually ordered an extra board. It's called the Talib. It's got a kick on both ends. It's 47 inches long. I'm looking forward to that. But before that happens, I can tell you that these L3-x's are pretty cool, and it's become my new favorite board because of the choices, the safety, the vibration absorption, and one last thing which I think is the coolest thing, which is when I take this to the shopping center, it's got so much ground clearance down there, and I was able to pick a taller board that I can just carry it like a suitcase, and this becomes weightless. And this is the coolest thing because longboards always become heavy. Once you take them off the street, you're not allowed to ride them around and wherever you're going. Now if I try that on the boosted board, it's 4 inches shorter, and the wheels aren't as high off the ground, so it actually drags on the wood, and I would have to crouch down like this to make it roll. And so it becomes a very heavy object to carry around, and so if I can have a bigger, more springy, more flexible board, and wherever I go it's weightless, then that is a huge advantage, and that's one of my favorite reasons to put the Landwheel on a deck that really suits your height. Now, for this one, I would still need to crouch down a little bit because it doesn't have quite the clearance to, almost. For my son, who's a shorter rider, that would work out for him. But that's all I have to say about the 4 boards. I hope that helps you to make a choice for what your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth electric longboard is going to be.